I'm going to start with part two of Culture and Personality School and the umbrella phrase anthropological theories. So far we have studied the relationship between culture and personality, which both of them they reinforces each other. So culture, sum total of all habits, attributes, personality, structure, beliefs, everything that helps a particular individual in survival is in totality known as culture. And character, the personality, it is a part of it. So in any culture, the homogeneity it is made up by the integration of all the personalities available, because in a culture, uh, when it has some certain boundaries, it acts as a closed loop, a loop in which all the members they have a certain personality character, they have certain personality attributes that are common between them, and such commonality it helps them in making a certain character. Then when we talk about the determinants of personality, so there are many such as the geography, the environment, the culture, heredity, experiences, peer pressure, uh, parental regulation. All in all, culture is influenced by personality, and personalities influence culture. Now, part two, it starts with the study of Sigmund Freud, because culture and personality school, also known as psychoanalytical school, in which psychological principles are applied in the study of culture under the umbrella organization Anthropology. So Sigmund Freud was the first psychologist to break the barrier between anthropology and psychology, and his best known anthropological work was about totem and taboo. So in this book, Freud provides an insightful description of taboo and that origin. So in this book, he talked about the relationship between totemism, incest taboo, exogamy, and Oedipus complex. So in this book, he argued that uh, in the mm, in the deep past there exists a primal horde, the leader of which was the oldest male. Horde is a group of Homo sapiens in the deep past. So it was led by a father figure, the oldest male who assumed exclusive sexual rights over all the females. And because of this jealousy, all the sons they murder and ate their father. But when the guilt overcome them, the guilt clouded them, guilt shrouded them, they decided to obey commands and abstain from sexual intercourse with their mother and sister. So this is how incest prohibitions they were placed and came into place, and this is how the same father figure which they murder and ate, it acted as a totem. So, known for his psychoanalysis, Freud saw the trauma of childhood reflected in the neurosis of adults. So, the meaning of this line is that whatever a child learned in his childhood, the same thing they reflected, they get zoomed out when he reaches the adulthood. So it's like whatever he learns in the childhood, such a microscopic characteristic, and those microscopic characteristic they zoom out, they become macroscopic characteristic while that is reached, and he established the Oedipus complex as a universal story in of this intention on his mother entertains host the same story, that it was about the exclusive section coveted by the father figure and who was murdered by this son, and finally this is how totem and various came to be placed. Now let's talk about impact on personality on culture. Ruth Benedict was a student of Franz Boas, and she documented her PhD dissertation in the rapidly deteriorating Native American society. And she was of opinion that life crisis rights are only one of the several ways in which pattern of culture emerges and are reflected in behavior of members. The meaning of this line is that it is the life crisis, the tough time, and why a tough time, you see various patterns of particular culture, and those patterns they are reflected in the behavior of members. So let's say the life crisis is about loss of one of the loved one. So this life crisis, it will have certain pattern. Different society, they have different way of mourning, and this pattern, it, it gets reflected in behavior in one way or another. Then, according to her, all the basic institutions that are part of culture tend to mirror the overall pattern of that culture. So, all the basic institutions of a culture, such as customs, the rituals, the behavior, the interpersonal behavior, the festivals, the folklores, the songs, the food habits, all of them, they are the basic institution that form a culture. And all the basic institution, they mirror the overall pattern for that culture. And you can take any example. For example, if you take example of martial class, so most of their folklores, most of their festivals, their customs, they are they revolve around the valor, the saga of valor, the saga of fortitude, the saga of war and subsequent victory. In the same way, if we talk about Indian culture, then most of the stories, most of the basic institution, most of the paraphernalia, they revolve around the triumph of good over evil, triumph of good over evil. And the same thing, the same basic pattern is reflected in many customs and festivals. You can take Deepavali, you can talk about Holi, you can take up Rakshaban. So all such institutions, they are about good over triumph of good over virtue, good over bad, good over evil, and the establishment of virtues, the resurgence of good times. So such particular themes, they keep making rounds in various festivals of Indian culture. So this is how this particular line, it can be explained that basic institution that they mirror the overall pattern of that culture. Then she wrote a famous book, Patterns of Culture, in 1934, and she considered culture as integrated wholes where each part is configured to be different from all other culture, and this is one of the significant contribution of her. So patterns of culture, it is about the different patterns that are seen in different cultures, and according to her, all the different culture, whether it is at a large scale, whether it is African culture, Egyptian culture, Russian culture, Central Asian culture, Mongolian culture, Indian culture, Japanese culture, Korean culture, all of them, they should be seen as an integrated whole, and all of them, they have some basic distinction from each other. So Russian culture, it would be it would have certain distinction with that of Indian culture, which would be different from Egyptian culture. So this was her contribution, which noted and highlighted various patterns that existed between different culture. And she also stressed that culture is organized around a basic theme. And as I have noted here, like if you talk about Indian culture, so it is mostly about establishment of virtue, resurgence of good times, triumph of good over evil, uh, having a virtuous society, virtuous quality. Like you may have seen this term many times, Maryada Purushottam. So Maryada Purushottam is not but nothing but a virtuous man. So virtues, from the ancient time, they have a good place in most the important aspects of Indian culture. In the same way, when you take up Russian culture, if you have read the works of Gogol, Dostoevsky, um, Solzhenitsyn, Tolstoy, and many such Russian literary giants, you would find many themes, many common themes that reverberates, that echoes through all of them. So, especially it is about tragedy and harshness of life, about mockery of various institutions, about the folly of the relationship between the elites and common people, the antagonist relationship that exists between various layers of society, the pitiful state in which the lower strata of the society lives. So these things are common in culture. When you read Asian novels such as from Japanese writers, you would see the common theme is about the friction between the older generation and the newer generations, the friction between what the society demand of them and what they need for themselves. So this kind of friction is a common theme between most of the Japanese work. So this is what this particular line signifies, that culture is around organized around a basic theme, and all of the various elements of the culture they fit together. Yes, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and for an outsider, all the different elements they may sound standing up for a discrete picture, but for the insider, all such elements, all such paraphernalia of festivals, beliefs, behavior pattern, also system, they fit together in a coherent and linear fashion. Let me give you an example. If you compare indigenous culture with that of mainstream culture in any part of the world, whether you compare the Australian Aborigines with that of Australian mainstream culture, the, the New Zealanders, the New Zealander native society to that of New Zealand mainstream society, even the 750 Indian tribal society with that of the multitude of caste and class groups that form the mainstream in Indian society. Whenever you look at them, you look at the difference between them, you find certain consistency in the differences. It's like those differences they appear to be fitting well. So let's take about the indigenous tribe of India. So most of them they consider the whole forest as their habitat. First thing, and for that matter, whole forest is their homeland. But when you talk about producing their land deeds, like all of the mainstream people, they have their personal property registered by their land deeds. The same deeds are absent in the tribal people. But when you ask them where they live, they would point to whole uh, a whole area, a whole forest, which would be called as their homeland, their habitat, their motherland, and they would protect it at any cost. So this distinction between what mainstream society consider as a private property and what for the tribal people consider it as an important distinction. For the mainstream people, private property matters a lot. It is by private property by which they establish themselves, they root themselves somewhere. It is their, you can say, their house, their home, their farmland, and above all, it is their property, it is their asset which would be helpful in the tough time. So, this is how mainstream society sees private property. But for forest people, most of the land it is common, the community land. They do not have the property deeds, and they do not have something in mind like um, keeping the private property secured for tough time, or making it a private asset. So it's, because the difference of such distinction, this problem of property registration, it has been, you can say, a thorny issue from the British time. Even the British could not handle this issue. The British could not find a solution to this issue. That the forest, for them, the whole forest people, the tribal people, the whole forest is their habitat. The whole forest their homeland. But the mainstream society, it needs that all the property should be registered, whether it is a public property or private property, and all that property that is not registered as a private, it would be considered a public property or a common property. And finally, the common theme is it should be registered as a property. But forests, they do not value this thing, and because of that, this thing, it has been making many legal rounds, and it has made many legal rounds. You will read about the Forest Right Act 2006, and still, I don't think this, even after enactment of this particular act, this issue is going to be resolved. It would surface in some or other forms. So, all in all, this habitat thing, or just this property thing, it it should be seen as a distinction between the indigenous people and mainstream people. So, for the mainstream people, registration of property, the property acting as an asset in their life, the various institutions, the various festivals, all of them they fit together, which starts with first the registration of property, because it is the registration followed by registration of various other things such as marriage, birth, death, a school registration. So the simple thing is, the mainstream society, it lives a recorded life, whereas forests, they do not consider this thing to be important or playing a significant role in their life. They are living up a different structure, different life, and they need that they the desire that they should be left to fend for themselves. Then, a culture, according to Benedict, is analogous to an individual. So she has compared culture with an individual, and that culture or individual, in comparison, they have a consistent pattern of thoughts and action. So, in short, we take up two things. This is a person, and now this is a culture. Let's take up Indian culture, because that would be very easy to understand. So every individual, he has some consistency in patterns of thoughts and action, if the person is not suffering from any mental delirium. So this consistency of thoughts and action, it is like he wakes up early in the morning, he goes for work. Let's take my example. I wake up early in the morning, then I look after my 8-month old daughter, then my family, then I start my work, I prepare the content, and I follow fulfill all the obligation, and this is how my whole day, and that day multiplied by the life I am going to live, is manifesting in my life, is having consistency of thoughts and action. It's not like that someday I'm looking after my daughter, and then I forgot about her for whole 2 to 10 years. It's not that. Or I'm teaching today, but I may not be teaching for a few years to come. This inconsistency is not there, and mostly you can see all the people all people who have come of age, after certain age, they know that they should have some occupation, some remunerative occupation which provide them certain semblance of livelihood. So this is a consistency of pattern of thoughts and action, which is this consistency is common in all people. Now compare that with the Indian culture. So there is consistency, like Diwali, according to the Indian calendar, the Hindu calendar, it comes at a certain time. It's not that this year this will come on a particular time in November, and then there is a break, and for a few years Diwali is not going to be celebrated because Diwali is not feeling like feeling like it. Or you say, yes, this time we are we are celebrating Republic Day on 26th January, but after a few years, it seemed that we are not happy with this date, and let's change it to 28th Feb, or let's change it to 29th Feb because we are fed up with celebrating it every year. Now it should happen once in a 4 year. So this inconsistency is not there. And in the same way, even the behavior pattern in the customs, they do not deviate much from the basic pattern. It's not like that. uh, the mourning period, especially when you lose someone in your life, so mourning follows, especially for 12 days. And most of the people, especially the rural people, and those who the ardent follower of Indian culture, they follow this 12-day mourning period. So this is a basic custom, whether you are a rich or a poor people, whether you are from the northern part or southern part. So this is the basic thing. But consistency is there. It's not like that only some people, only people of Maharashtra, they would follow the 12-day ritual, and uh, certainly the Odia people, they not feel like mourning for such an extended time, and they think, okay, this time we are not going to mourn for the loss. This time we should organize certain other ritual. We should change the ritual, and this mourning, this crying, this rona dhona, this should stop here. And why don't we start dance? Why don't we start new dancing class this time? So this inconsistency is never there. So this is the meaning of her analogy. Then, according to her, when traits and complexes become related to each other in functional roles, a cultural pattern is formed. And many cultural patterns integrate themselves into a functional whole and form a spatial design of whole culture. So, the spatial design of whole culture is called configuration of culture. This is her basic hypothesis, her basic idea, configuration of culture. And that's why her theory, or you can say her postulation, is known as configurational culture. So this definition is that when many traits and complexes, they are related to each other in functional role, a cultural pattern is formed. So you can say, talk about the way weddings are organized in India. So most of the weddings, they start with this haldi program, then sangeet, then the bandoli, and finally fera and vidai. So these five things are common, and each of them, haldi, sangeet, bandoli, fera, and vidai, all of them, they are individual traits, but they have formed together. They have they are related to each other, and that's why they form a culture pattern known by wedding. That Indian wedding, especially the Hindu wedding, it should happen in this way. Now, many such cultural pattern. So wedding, followed by the um, the birth of child. Now this birth of child, it has certain customs associated with it, such as baby shower, then naming of baby. Now, and many custom they also associate mundan or something analogous. So these three ceremonies, these three customs are related to the birth ceremony. Now we have two cultural patterns. The first is a wedding, the second is about birth, and you can also take our new one. It's like engagement ceremony. So we have three cultural patterns here, and all the three cultural patterns, they form together. They you can they associate themselves into a spatial design, and this spatial design it forms a whole culture. So this is spatial design is also known as configuration of culture, that how particular culture are configured. So for anyone from any outsider, all the customs and all the ceremonies, uh, I would name them cultural patterns. So all the cultural pattern may seem distinct to an outsider, but all of them they are related, because wedding would be followed by birth in most cases, and especially if you are particular about following the Indian custom, the custom that have been making round since the time immemorial. So those custom that you are following for whatever reason, those custom they have been configured over many decades or hundreds of years. So the and this is how this configuration it comes into picture. In other words, let's say in the deep past, one of this institution, one of the custom, one of the cultural pattern, it started taking place. So by trial and error and by experiences of people, those who started it, and then the mutual consent, all of the institution, all of the cultural pattern, they took their present form. So uh, it's like all the cultural pattern, they are distinct entities, but when you fit them together one by one, step by step, they make sense. And this making of sense, this is known as configuration of culture. Now, according to her, there are two types of geniuses found in human society: Apollonian and Dionysian. So, in Apollonian pattern, one will see the existence of peace, discipline, and kindness. So, these virtues, these attributes, characteristics, they are associated with Apollonian pattern. And the Dionysian culture, that deals with changes and aggressiveness. So, these two geniuses, they mold the personality of members of that group. So she studied, she did her fieldwork among Zuni, Cochiti, and Paima tribes of America. And in her monograph, Patterns of Culture, she discussed the personality types between Zuni of Southwest America and Kwakiutl of Northeast coast of North America. So the primary occupation of these two communities are different. The Zuni are foragers in resource-rich environment, whereas Kwakiutl are agriculturists. So she described Zuni as very cooperative and never excessive any aspect of their life. The typical Zuni was a person who sought to mingle with a group, who did not wish to stand out as a superior, and again, she went to point out how the basic personality types are reinforced in other elements of Zuni culture. So, her distinction, because we are talking about culture and personality school, and this school it talks about how personality types they influence culture, or how culture are influenced by personalities. So, this reinforcement, this reciprocal behavior, it was studied by her. So, in the Zuni culture, child training pattern, they were designed to suppress individuality. Initiation ceremony, they were characterized by a lack of ordeal, and the youths were initiated in the group setting. Marriages were relatively casual. Leadership among the Zuni were ignored whenever possible, and priests, they were low-key individuals. And then it was a medicine society rather than a single powerful medicine man. And finally, death was an occasion for little mourning in Zuni tribe. So when she compared her study with the cultural configuration of Kwaki Utul, which was much different from the Zuni. So Kwaki Utul, they were characterized by frenzied outlook, excess being the rule than the exception. They were ambitious and striving. Individuality was emphasized in every aspect of their life. And now she tried to trace the individual personality type with that of the whole culture, and she found that various customs such as child rearing practices, they were reinforced. They emphasized achievement of the individual over cooperation with their group. Initiation ceremony, the boy was expected to go out by himself and experience a personal relationship with the supernatural, which means the initiation ceremony were led with ordeals. Marriage, it entailed tremendous celebration. Leadership among this Kwaki Utul community, it was characterized by a constant struggle for power. Religious position, it included that of a shaman, a priest who wielded enormous personal power, in contrast to Zuni tribe in which priests were low-key individual. And death was a major event, which an occasion for elaborate mourning, which was in contrast to little mourning practiced by the Zuni tribe. So she considered Zuni to be non competitive, non aggressive, and gentle, whereas the Kwaki Utul to be characterized by strife, factionalism, and painful ceremonies. So, the final analysis, she described Zuni as Apollonian and Kwaki Utul as Dionysian after the Greek gods of wine and light. And these categories were derived from the work of Friedrich Nietzsche, his work The Birth of Tragedy. Finally, in the next paragraph, Benedict rejected Freud's notion of cultural evolution as unscientific and ethnocentric, and she remained loyal to Wilhelm Dilthey, another psychoanalyst who believed that the objective of psychology was to understand the inner mind and who proposed existence of different worldviews. So, uh, if this passage need explanation, so Freud he talks about cultural evolution as unscientific and ethnocentric, meaning that Sigmund Freud believed that cultural evolution cannot be studied in a scientific manner. And ethnocentric means to view other cultures via your own culture. So she rejected both the notions and she accepted the notions given by Wilhelm Dilthey, who believed that psychology is about understanding the inner mind, the inner psyche, and there can exist many different worldviews. In the next paragraph, during the Second World War, the need was felt to understand the national characteristic of Japan, and some of the American anthropologists they help in analyzing it through films. And they came to the conclusion that strict toilet training among the Japanese made them aggressive fighters in the warfare. So here again, a relationship highlighted between culture and personality type, and especially the child rearing practices. Next paragraph. Ruth Benedict made a significant contribution in developing and applying the content analysis method, which is to study any culture from a distance. Because during the World War II, many anthropologists they could not freely travel to do the field work. The US Office of War Information has asked her to undertake research on occupied or enemy nations, and she selected Japan as her first target and wrote her famous work, The Chrysanthemum and Sword of 1946, which depicted the culture of Japan in a holistic manner. So she described Japanese culture as having two methods of child rearing. In Japan, during childhood, an individual is given full love, freedom, care, and cooperation. But when he or she reaches the stage of adolescence, a strict discipline is imposed. So this paradox in personality traits of Japanese, it appears due to different cultural tradition of rearing in childhood and adolescence. She compares the child rearing practices in Japan to be the national flower of Japan, chrysanthemum, and the sword. Chrysanthemum stands for childhood and the sword stands for adolescence. So chrysanthemum symbolizes the socialization of child during childhood. So Japanese parents they take every care of the children to make them blossom like a chrysanthemum flower. But when the children are fully blossomed like adolescent, they have to face a tough life. Parents leave them to earn something and lead independent life. And as a result of this, children become aggressive and violent. A sword always hangs on their neck. So this is the ultimate meaning of her famous work. Then there were many other best known studies on national character, like her work, Chrysanthemum and Sword, on Japanese, whereas Jeffrey Gorer and John Rickman's The Peoples of Great Russia, a psychological study on Russian people. So many such national character studies were taken during that time. Now let's have a look at impact of culture on personality. So Margaret Mead, another student of French Boas, also investigated the relationship between culture and personality. Her monograph, Coming of Age in Samoa, it's talk about how transition to adolescence was less stress free in Samoan girls. Then she started as a configurationalist. Uh, she wrote about national character, uh, the name of that file. The name of our work is Study of Culture at a Distance. Then she determined that in each society the norms for interaction between the sexes differed. So in her well-known book Coming of Age in Samoa, she compared Samoan with American adolescent girls. And she hypothesized that the stresses related to puberty in girls were culturally and not biologically determined. And she showed that the stresses were mainly associated with the American adolescent, whereas the Samoan adolescent had relatively an easy transition into sexual maturation. The meaning of this is the transition to adolescence after puberty, it was relatively stress-free in Samoan girls. So while studying Samoa, she found that whole cultural mood in Samoa was much less emotional than that in America. For example, the facts of birth, death, and sex were not hidden from the Samoan children. Premarital sex was considered natural and did not demand strong emotional involvement. And adolescents, they were not confronted with the necessity of selecting from a variety of often conflicting standards of ethics and values. The meaning of this passage is that the all the important parameters, especially including one's sexual and emotional life, most of them they were relatively relaxed in Samoan culture, and many things such as premarital sex, yeah, the standards, especially the quality and virtue which are in many mainstream society that are associated with piety and virginity, they were not giving much stress, much prominence in Samoan culture. So, in short, adolescence was not marked by storm and stress in Samoa. It's simply a part of gradual development in life. And the major point of our study was in Mead's own word, the documentation over and over of the fact that human nature is not rigid and unyielding. So, in short, by her study, she found out that the cultural pattern, the you can say the virtuosity, the rules and regulation, they were not rigid in Samoan society. In her study of Samoan, Margaret Mead claims that children are taught early in their life that if they behave well and are quiet and obedient, they can have a good way of life. Arrogance, flippancy, and courage are not the quality emphasized either for boys and girls. So children are expected to get up early, be obedient, cheerful, play with the children of their own sex, and adults are expected to be industrious, skillful, loyal to their relatives, wise, peaceful, serene, gentle, generous, and overall the the various virtues that have been cited here, the the regulations, they were not that rigid. It was a lenient society, and most of these transitions, they they could have applied to the adults, but the children, especially those who are transitioning to the adolescence, they were relatively kept free from such strictness. And during her field work, she observed that little girls, they move about together and have antagonistic and avoidant relationship with boys. The little girls did not mingle up with boys, but when they grew up, when they become adolescent, the boys and girls, they began to interact during parties and fishing expedition, and such amorous activities, they were often ignored by their adults, their parents. So she concluded that it is cultural conditioning, not biological changes, that are associated with adolescence, and such stressful cultural conditioning makes the transition stressful. And her work was also supported by Edward Sapir, who argued that the application of psychoanalytic methods in the study of culture, it would add a new dimension to ethnographic fieldwork and analysis. And he was much interested in this psychoanalytic method. The meaning of this passage is that Edward Sapir, he said that if you apply the principle of psychology to ethnographic accounts, ethnographic field work, then you would arrive at a totally different picture. Because if such psychological dimensions are not looked into, then you may arrive at a picture. You may be looking, you may be observing a different culture from outside, but you would never know what goes inside in their mind. So to know their inner psyche, to know their emotional and psychological state, you should involve such psychoanalytical method in ethnographical studies. So after the Samoan society, she studied the personality formation of children of New Guinea, especially the Manus tribe, and published her work Growing Up in New Guinea. So this study is concerned with a kind of enculturation process by which Manus of New Guinea brought up their children from infancy to childhood and from childhood to adulthood. Then her third important work, Sex and Temperament in the Three Primitive Society, and it dealt with the impact of culture on personality formation on three different culture, the Arapesh, the Mundigomo, and Chambuli. And this study, it was to understand why society living in the same area differ in their character, personality, and temperament. So these three tribes were studied, and her conclusion are as such. From her studies, she found that in Arab age, the cultural environment are such that both males and females have submissive temperament, and in their culture, such personality traits, submission, are the matter of great praise, and all members in the society follow these cultural traits with great enthusiasm. Then, in Mundugumo society, both males and females are aggressive. In this society, characters such as suspiciousness, competition, quarrelsomeness, ego, jealousy, and unkindness, they are reflected by all its members. And the cultural environment of Mundugumo is that every member is found to be in struggle, conflict, and competition with each other. Now, the cultural tradition of Chamboli are such that males acquire submissive temperament and female possess aggressive character. It is because Chamboli is a matrilineal society dominated by female authority. So, from this study in the three society, it Mead reflected that differences in personality type of male and female in the society are due to cultural processes, because all the three society, they are living in close proximity with each other. So here the geography and environment, it is same. And she concluded that it is a cultural influence which molds the character, temperament, and personality of members of group. And she opines that the study of national character can be done by culture and personality approach. Culture has been developed by human beings and is successively learned by each generation. This learned behavior is reflected in the character of group of nation. The meaning of this paragraph is that she believed national character of any country, it can be accomplished via following this approach, culture and personality approach. So, culture and personality approach, which involves the psychology or psychological dimension, and most of it, it studies the the important the important transitionary elements in a particular society. And in the beginning, it starts with child rearing practices. So, as has been seen in the study of Ruth Benedict, Chrysanthemum, and the Sword, the children, they were treated differently in their childhood and adulthood. So, such institutions, such transitions, study of which, it can be helpful in arriving at a national character of any country. And to support her argument, she said that culture, it has been developed by humans, and this culture is successfully learned and transmitted by and to each generation. So this learned behavior, this transmitted behavior, it is reflected in the character of group of nation. So all the Indian people, if they have similar culture, so this culture which would be learned and transmitted to the successive generation. So if you study any generation and all its custom, all its psychological attributes, then you can arrive at Indian national character. So it was the meaning of this paragraph and her argument. Then, by her study, Keep Your Powder Dry, an anthropologist look at looks at America. She deals with the national character of America, and her study found that there were no differences in personality of baby in America as compared to Japan and Russia. So child rearing practices everywhere are similar. Mm, According to her, the early personalities was similar. They gradually start differing as the growth follows and family education and school education became effective. And then the adolescent training, the adolescent lecture, the transmission of the particular elements of a culture, it gradually made the difference. Now, impact of culture on personality and vice versa. So Linton, Abraham Gardner, and Cora Dubois, these are associated with this school. The three authors, they regard culture and personality as interdependent and complementary to each other, and they try to correlate the type of cultural pattern with the type of individual personality obtained in that society. And meaning of this, their postulation, their hypothesis is that they regard that culture and personality both are interdependent, a reciprocal relationship, complementary relationship, and they try to correlate the cultural pattern present in any society with the type of individual personalities. So this thing is, um, you know, reverberating. This thing is being echoed in a whole lecture. We can see all the anthropologists associated with culture and personality school, they highlight the same thing, that culture pattern and individual personality both are related to each other, and their hypothesis is no different. Linton, who was co-founder of basic personality structure theory with Gardner, and he sought to establish a basic personality for each culture. So Ralph Linton, he noted three type of culture. First, the real culture, which is the actual behavior. Second, ideal culture, the philosophical and traditional culture. And third, cultural construct, which is what is written on cultural element. So these three type of culture exist in a society. Real culture is the sum total of behavior, the actual behavior of member of society. A real culture represents a limited range of behavior within which the response of the member of society to a particular situation will normally be formed. So, real situation is most likely the normal behavior. So, normal, or you can say usual behavior, behavior that is not particularly restricted, behavior that is not sought, behavior that comes out on its own. So, for example, if there are no festivals, if there are no ceremonies, if it is only you and your siblings talking to each other, so you know the atmosphere would be very informal. It's not that you and your sibling are talking to each other in a formal way while using very notation and salutation such as Mr. or Miss or uh, many such salutation, many such formal notation that are associated with talking to a formal authority. So this informality would be there, and if you're talking to someone in authority, like say you are talking to some district collector, or not district collector, you are talking to a chief minister or someone who you respect, if you're talking to your father, if you talking to someone, especially in a social setting, you have a family gathering at your home, you have a social ceremony at your home, maybe it's the engagement of your sister. Now the tone, the behavior pattern, they all of them, they include the element of formality. You behave in a different way. So this distinction, it has been highlighted by Ralph Linton, that real culture, it is the normal usual behavior, the informal behavior, and it is a limited range of behavior, because formality, the formal behavior, it seeks broad range of behavior, that while talking to the people who you need for your work, while talking to a superior authority, a formal authority, then you try to keep yourself formal and keep your range of behavior as broad as possible. It's not that you're going to meet a district collector and talking to him that ये मेरा काम करो. You know that this is not the way your work would be done. You are going to talk to him in a polite manner, even if the authoritative tone can be there, but still the formal element, the respect, the salutation and notation, they would be there. So all of these behavior and all of these elements, they make the formal behavior a behavior of broad range rather than the informal behavior which is of a limited range. Now, the ideal culture or ideal cultural pattern, they are formed by philosophical tradition. So there is a difference between the way of life of people and what we study and write about. So this difference is they are different. These differences are different dimensions of a culture. The former one is reality, what we see in lives of people, and the later is our understanding of the same. So former is called the culture, and later can be called the cultural construct. So this philosophical tradition, as you know, uh, the whatever culture you talk about. Well, I keep taking up the example of Indian culture because I guess it is easy to understand because we can relate it to it. So as I have said, Indian culture, it is about the maintenance of virtues, virtuosity, um, being a person in sound nature and intentions. So all such attributes, all such elements of cultural tradition, they are philosophical. Even a simple thing like you should respect your parents, you should bow before them whenever you can, you should touch their feet, and it is believed that, according to outsider, it is believed that Indian children, all the Indian children, they touch the feet of their parents. But we know that it's uh, it's the difference is there. We have an informal domestic atmosphere and a formal outside or formal public behavior. So we maintain this distinction. We have our parents and we know we respect them, but it's not that we always keep touching their feet and keep them on high pedestal. We have our moments. We sometimes we argue with them. Sometimes there is an outburst of anger. Sometimes they do not reckon with us. They do not understand it. Sometimes we do not understand them, and this is how this friction, this friction of informal nature. It is particular of all households. Every household goes through such phase. So what others see, what the public appearance, what the outside appearance, formal kind of nature, it is a philosophical time. So this philosophical thing that is being written about Indian culture, that Indian children, they respect, they revere their parents, they touch their feet, and but we know the real story that yes, they respect their parents, but it's all the cultural attributes, all the activities that are associated with them, they may not be true all the time. But still, such philosophical distinctions are maintained for one or another reasons. So, while studying different aspects of culture and personality, Linton suggested more concepts such as basic personality, status personality, and social inventor. So, according to him, he argued that in all society, all the individuals undergo a similar type of socialization, custom, and tradition, and therefore individuals acquire a common set of habits, which may be called a basic personality of the society. And how I can give you example of how um, people in Rajasthan, whenever they meet, especially in the Jodhpur division, in the Marwar division, whenever any adults meet, they would fold their hands in namaste and speak Ram Ram Sa to each other. So this behavior, this particular habit, it is a formal behavior. It is very common. This socialization is particular of Jodhpuri or Marwari tradition. So this is a basic personality type. It's not that two people they meeting each other, they shake hands or say hi to each other, hello to each other, uh, and other kinds of greetings. Other greetings they are usually avoided. One common greeting that would find them in all the people, especially the 20 plus, they greet each other via this common phrase, this greeting phrase. So this common greeting, it is a basic personality of society, and you can take up many examples. And different examples would be there, like Mallu people, whenever they greet each other, it's like Angan Vrida, all of them, or if they it is a male to female or female to female, it's like Angan Vrida. So this greeting phrase, it is common everywhere. Only the notation change, only the language change, but the basic personality type it is there. In this Punjabi people, you would hear Sat Sri Akal. So my point is clear here, and such basic personality type they form up the basic personality of a society. Then there are certain individuals who are granted some special privileges and that form a status personality, especially the people from higher status, higher social and political status. So caste panchayats still have a sway in especially the rural and urban part of India. So those the head of caste panchayat, they hold a special privileges than many prominent personality such as the village headmen, the local politicians, then the dharm gurus, the priests, the pious men, all people who are you can club them such as all Naga people, Naga sadhus, all Aghoris, then every kind of hermit and ascetic people, all people who are on the way of such dharmic life. So all those people can be clubbed as pious people. So all those pious people, priests, dharma gurus, village headmen, head of caste panchayats, all of them, they hold special status. They hold special privileges and they are known as status personality. Now, the social inventor. So, in every society, some individuals are there who do not wish to follow the old traditional rules. And these people, they make up many new discoveries, they bring in many new kind of behavior, and this is how every society molds through, transition through the old custom to the new custom. So, these people, they are known as social inventors. Next paragraph, he discussed different types of role played by an individual in society. So the term role refers to the rules for behavior appropriate to a given status or social position. So every social position, whether it is of a priest, of a village headman, whether it is the that of a politician, a scholarly man, all of them, those social position or status, they have some appropriate behavior associated with them, and those appropriate behavior they are known as role. And for status, he ascribed two kinds. He identified two kinds. First, the ascribed and the achieved status. So, ascribed status is usually the role that comes by birth. So, it is based on age, sex, kinship, caste, and many such status that cannot be changed and that comes up usually with the birth. But the achieved status, on the contrary, is something that has been achieved by some efforts. So, most of the occupational roles, leadership, doctor, engineer, lawyer, they are achieved status. And this is it. We'll talk about the rest of the chapter in the next video. Thank you very much.